I can't predict what other countries are going to do. All I can do is tell you what I'm seeing in real time. And what I'm seeing in real time is incredible amounts of FOMO from state lawmakers to be able to participate in this policy vertical. We not only have 20 plus, maybe it's 21, I believe at this point. It's hard to track them all because we as some people know, we open source our model policy. A lot of these states, I would say about 99, maybe 95% of them, the bills that they're introducing to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve is based off of the model policy from Satoshi Action. We open source that, we put it on the internet. Some lawmakers, we directly engage with them or they reach out to us and we have a conversation and we're working on this bill with them directly, trying to get it across the finish line. But some lawmakers just go to the website or they see another lawmaker introduce this bill that we've made and they say, oh, I'm just going to copy that. So it's hard for us to even track all of the bills because sometimes people are just doing it completely emergently based off of the success and the FOMO that we've created around strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. We were the first in the entire world to introduce that legislation at the state level in Pennsylvania. And we've gone on to do it back to back to back to back as far as the introductions are concerned. And now we're in a great position to get it across the finish line.
Hey guys, welcome back to another channel. Today I'm here with Satoshi Act co-founder and CEO, Dennis. How you doing, man?
Great to be here with you, Em. Excited to have this conversation. So many great things we can talk about with regards to Bitcoin. The world is changing rapidly, and we're right there at the forefront, helping to push it along.
What's going on in the US, man? We have 20 states adopting Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. Is it moon time? I mean, are we going to the moon? What do you think?
I think we're getting ready. We're building the rocket, so to speak, and we're getting ready to fly to the moon with Bitcoin. No, but to bring it all into all seriousness, I think it's a very incredible time that we're in right now, where all of a sudden we have well over, I think we might even have 21 states at this point who are working on some type of strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. And that doesn't even include Washington, D.C., where there's clearly an effort taking place for a potential strategic Bitcoin reserve. Maybe it's a digital asset stockpile, which of course would have Bitcoin in it. But we are at the precipice of a new era. We are entering the Bitcoin era. We're entering a period where we debate over how we do Bitcoin instead of debating over whether or not we should do Bitcoin. The anti-crypto army is gone. They've been eviscerated. And now we're just going to be fighting forward to see how much progress we can make over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. And I think that we shouldn't take this period for granted because political headwinds, they change all the time. Right now, it feels like sunshine and rainbows and everything is beautiful in the sky when it comes to Bitcoin in the United States. But we need to take advantage of that period and move as far forward as we possibly can in what may be, it could be a short period of time, it could be a long period of time. But we absolutely should not take it for granted. And we should go out there and we should win for Bitcoin. We should get strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation across the finish line at the state level and hopefully at the federal level as well.
2025, I mean, technically, I don't want to jinx it, but it should be the last year for the bull market, right? Because if we move in cycles, in 4-year cycles, technically 2025 should be the last one. Are you expecting this to break the cycle and enter the so-called super cycle? What do you think?
Wow, we've talked about super cycles for a long time, and you've probably talked about them longer than I have, given how long you've been in the Bitcoin space. You know, who knows? Eventually, I do believe we will have what some people call a super cycle. At the end of the day, there's only so much Bitcoin out there, and the further along the supply curve that we move, eventually we're going to hit a point when there's just not enough Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin is going to jump very rapidly because people just can't get their hands on it. So certainly I do believe that that could be close. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we might have one more cycle in us. And unless, of course, you know, they turn the money printer back on and they go burr and we start to see massive amounts of monetary debasement take place in order to compensate for some of the debt restructuring that's going to be going on all over the world. I mean, you've got so much debt that countries are in, that banks are in. And it's going to come to a point where they're not going to be able to afford this amount of debt. They're going to refinance it soon. And the interest rates, they don't look great. They really don't look great. And so if we want to be able to have a world where we're going to be able to see a super cycle, it's going to either be next cycle, in my opinion, or it's going to be in a situation where we get another, maybe like a black swan event where the economy collapses and they just have to start printing like crazy.
It's such a good point, and you touched on supply, and 5% is in the hands of the ETFs, like BlackRock's and company. And of course, Michael Saylor is scooping up with strategy now it's called. I have to adjust to the new branding. Are you worried about the ETF having this many Bitcoins in their hands? Because 5% is quite, I mean, in 12 months, by the way. So it's going to massively increased over the past few years. Does it bother you? Does it worry you?
I mean, at the end of the day, the 5% that's held by these ETFs is actually owned by a broad range of people that own the ETF, which is sort of underpinned by the underlying Bitcoin asset. So it is really a collection of people that own the Bitcoin, and it of course is custodied by various custody providers. And you already see some dynamics like this with exchanges as well. As a lot of people own Bitcoin, they hold it on an exchange, and they don't really own the Bitcoin at that point. So I would love to see a lot more people holding their Bitcoin. I know there's a lot of folks out there, myself included, probably you as well, who probably self-custody a portion, at least a portion of their Bitcoin. And so we definitely want to see more of that take place. We definitely want to see more decentralization of the supply. I don't think we're in any sort of like danger zone for people who hold supply impacting the code. Oftentimes people always ask me that are outside the Bitcoin space, well, don't they have undue influence? And yeah, they could have some undue influence over the market, impacting prices up or down. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a user-driven technology, and the folks that are running nodes at home, at work, all around the world, there's tens of thousands of these nodes running all the time, as you fully well know. Those are the people that get to make the decision over what direction they go. It's not Michael Saylor, and it's not BlackRock.
How long do you think we need before we catch up with gold? Because as we speak, I think gold is around 20 trillion. I think it was 18 or 19 last night I checked, and Bitcoin is about 2 trillion.
I mean, nobody really knows, right? At the end of the day, we can't predict the future of gold versus Bitcoin, but ultimately, Bitcoin is a superior form of a scarce asset. Gold can be mined. There can be more new supply all the time. And as the price of gold goes up, more gold mining takes place. And in fact, you got Elon talking about how he's going to go out into the asteroids and he's going to mine gold from the asteroids. So there's, they've talked about how like one of these asteroids that's floating around in space has more gold on it than like all the above ground gold today. So there's a lot of ways that gold is sort of inferior, including also the fact that it is physical. And this is the funny thing, you always talk to the gold bugs or people that are at least like somewhat familiar with gold, and they're not familiar with Bitcoin. Like, well, I can't hold Bitcoin. I can't touch Bitcoin. It's like, well, that's actually the benefit of Bitcoin. The fact that you can hold and touch gold is what set it back. It is what made gold fail as money, because you can't transport gold over large distances without a lot of logistics and a lot of money. You also have to spend a lot of money to store large amounts of gold. I mean, look at Fort Knox. That thing's crazy. Like the amount of money that goes into protecting the gold, it's insane. Ultimately, Bitcoin, because of its non-physical nature, you're able to store it for free, essentially for free. I mean, obviously, you're going to probably have a little bit more money that goes into your tech operation if you're the United States government holding on to 200,000 Bitcoin, but it would be a fraction of a cost to be able to store 200,000 Bitcoin than it would be to store the equivalent amount of gold. And you can also transport that gold, that digital gold, I should say, anywhere in the world, basically for free. Like, what are you paying like right now? Like it's $1 or $2. You could send $1 billion of essentially digital gold anywhere in the world for a couple bucks. Imagine trying to send a couple $1 billion of gold across the ocean. The logistics would be a nightmare. The cost would be out of control. So in a way, of course, we go back to this physical nature and we go back to this comparison on gold, and we go back to the fact that Bitcoin is clearly a superior form of money. I don't know when it's going to outstrip gold, but we know that it is inevitable.
In a much smaller scale, when I was in London and I moved to Dubai, I had a gold position. Imagine me with 2 bags of plastic bags at the custom. Hey guys, I'm BB, I'm going to Dubai. I mean, they were confiscated everything, and it wasn't even a major position, but still, you can't transfer it, like you said. So when it comes to scalability, transportability, divisibility, Bitcoin, of course, is difficult to beat. And what's your stance on other crypto? Because, I mean, I was not expecting Trump to launch a meme coin. No way, no chance.
I mean, for me, at the end of the day, I'm very focused on Bitcoin. I think that Bitcoin is going to have absolutely incredibly positive impacts on society, on the world, on the economy. And there's really just no other technology in the space that is going to fix fundamental problems in society better than Bitcoin will. Bitcoin as a technology has incredible benefits that it can provide to individuals, to governments, to energy companies, to the grid. Bitcoin is the most important savings technology that we have in human history, because when you buy a little bit of Bitcoin, you know for a fact that you own that amount of the total supply forever. If you own Apple, if you own even MicroStrategy or Strategy as it's called now, or if you even own gold, when the price goes up with gold, they mine more. When you have companies like Strategy and Apple and Google who decide to debase or dilute their shareholders, they can do that without you stopping them as an individual. And so if you want to save your wealth, if you want to save your time, if you want to save your energy, the fact that you've been out there, you've been toiling in the soil, so to speak, of life, trying to earn a wage, trying to earn a salary, and you want to store that effort into a monetary unit, there simply is no better monetary unit than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is by far and away the best savings technology in the world. But that's not all. It's also the most decentralized and the most superior form of a payment network, because you can basically send anything to anyone anywhere in the world where there's any type of internet connection, and it's entirely inclusive. Unlike lots of other types of financial instruments out there, there is exclusion taking place. Just look at the world. How many people are able to even participate in US markets when it comes to stocks and bonds, you name it? Very few people can access these technologies. Look at the ability for folks to be able to participate in different types of financial tools based on their credit, based on maybe in some parts of the world, their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, the color of their skin. You know, what are their tendencies when it comes to their sexual preferences, when it comes to the person that they want to love. In some parts of the world, people are persecuted for various types of things that they can't change about themselves. And so Bitcoin comes along, and all of a sudden you have this technology where it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter who you want to love. It doesn't matter your political beliefs. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're from, what class you come from. You can access Bitcoin and no one can stop you. And that is a very powerful thing. And we're not even getting into the energy benefits of Bitcoin mining. So this technology is by far and away going to have incredible ramifications for the entire globe. And there are certainly crypto projects out there. You could people like to compare them. I don't really think that you can compare them. There's Bitcoin, and then there is platform. This is how I make the difference. This is sort of a new explanation for me. You have Bitcoin, which is global payment network, perfect savings technology, and also Bitcoin mining, which is an energy technology. And then you have what are crypto platforms, where people will do smart contracts, maybe, where people will maybe do NFTs, where they will do gaming, where they will do meme coins, as you said. But these are wholly separate. In my opinion, it's a race to the bottom on the crypto platform side, because the cheaper, the better. The faster, the better. But when you get cheaper and you get faster, you have to compromise. When you intentionally go out of your way to be cheaper and faster, you have to compromise decentralization, and you have to compromise on the technology side as well. And so when you're looking at the difference between the two, do you want to own something where there's no compromise? The value that you store is stored permanently and indefinitely. No one can dilute you. You have access no matter what, no matter where you are in the world. Or do you want to store your value in something that can be diluted, that does take compromises, that has sometimes they go back in history and they change the blocks, they change the order of the blocks. It's called a block reorg. I would personally much rather have my value stored in something that no one can mess with than in a crypto project, which may have value from an extent that it allows those utility functions to exist, but it's a race to the bottom. And I'd much rather be storing my wealth in a place where there's not a race to the bottom, to be able to remove decentralization and decrease costs as fast as possible.
I completely agree. I think it's potatoes and bananas, right? Like first we should establish what money is. Then once we agree what money is, we can build layers on top to allow us to transact faster, cheaper, whatever, but it comes from the same base, right? So everyone is thinking about the super fast transaction per second kind of Visa thing, but they forgot that the money has not been, quote, agreed to begin with. You said something interesting there. So what's your view on quantum computers? Because, oh my God, my friends are bombarding my timeline lately saying that we all have like 5 years and then we are doomed into the AI is going to take over. I mean, what do you think, man? What's your view?
I mean, personally, if the continues on the trajectory that it is currently on, you know, it's this hyper intelligent software, so to speak, um, you know, if it gets very smart, it's probably going to end up wanting to use Bitcoin to store its value because no one can take the value away from the AI if it's using Bitcoin as its base layer protocol for exchange. On quantum computing, I'm no expert on quantum computing, but I talk to some very smart people, and the very smart people that I speak to have sort of helped me get to a point where I don't have major concerns. Yes, could quantum computing be used to crack encryption for Bitcoin? That is true. But also at the same time that it's cracking the encryption for Bitcoin, SHA-256, or the elliptic curve, I think is actually the one that people said it would hit first. You're going to see encryption fail for all sorts of things that are probably, from a national security perspective, much more important than Bitcoin at this current state and where we are right now. We're talking about accessing, nuclear submarines. We're talking about accessing like the nuclear codes. We're talking about accessing the underlying principles of the entire banking system, and the energy system that we live within. So if someone has a quantum computer that can crack Bitcoin, it's very unlikely that they're going to use it on Bitcoin. If they're smart, they're going to wait and use it for some other purpose. But even if they did, let's say they did use it that way, although it would be what I would call a nuclear option, you can change the encryption of Bitcoin. You can upgrade it. Bitcoin is a protocol, just very much like the internet, and you can make changes to it collectively. So if there is a threat like that, that's so big where they've cracked the encryption of Bitcoin, I'm fairly confident the community would rally around making a change, changing the encryption, upgrading the encryption to post-quantum cryptography, which is something that's also being worked on right now actively. And we would be able to continue using Bitcoin. Would it be a difficult moment? Would there be certainly some friction? Absolutely. It would not be an easy thing to do, but it would not destroy Bitcoin. So that's the most important thing to keep in mind, is that we have this backup option, worst case scenario, that we can tap into if need be.
I've asked ChatGPT, speaking about intelligence, artificial intelligence, I've asked ChatGPT not long ago how many people are in crypto, and it gave me about 7% of the population, of which half is in Bitcoin, more or less. So we're talking about small numbers. And even though they won't be accurate 100%, I think it makes sense. Maybe like a 5 to 7% seems accurate to me. I mean, what do we need to expand this number to maybe bring it to 15% or double the size of it? It's something that the US can do with Trump. It's something that we have to do socially. It's more podcasts, more books. What do you think?
I mean, it's a great question. Absolutely. I think, we shouldn't be too disappointed with the trajectory of adoption. We're talking about a totally new protocol here. And similar to the internet, it takes time for people to adopt a new protocol, especially when you're not willing to compromise on the underlying foundational principles of why that protocol exists in the first place. It's very much like when the internet, early days, people were like, "Oh, what are we going to use this for?" They didn't even know, and at first it was just used by scammers, fraudsters, for criminals, is what people thought. Same thing. People said the same thing about Bitcoin, and then eventually upgrades were made to the internet protocol, particularly to TCP/IP, which enabled a lot more functionality. You had Web 2.0 come out. Of course, people talk about Web 3.0. It's a totally different thing. But Web 2.0, you're allowed to do things like this, where we can talk across the entire planet and stream and have a conversation, and the latency is great. You can watch football, you can watch soccer, you can watch, which for some people those are the same thing. You can watch video games, stream live, play live. These are incredible features that nobody would have ever thought possible with the internet in the early days, but there was upgrades to that protocol that enabled it to do more and more, and that of course captured more people in the sense that it grew the adoption, because there was so much more that you could do on the internet than anyone ever thought possible. I believe that exact same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin, and we already are seeing it take place. We are seeing the Lightning Network being built on top of Bitcoin, which is a layer 2 protocol that enables for much faster, much cheaper transactions. And there's even efforts now underway for groups like Tether to bring the dollar back to Bitcoin. Tether now has said, they've launched and said that they are bringing their stablecoin, which is a US-backed stablecoin, onto the Lightning Network, enabling Bitcoin users now to able to not only transact in Bitcoin, but to transact in dollars as well. And as time goes on, more and more things, more and more features will be added to Bitcoin, to the extent that it could become like, wow, you basically can't live without this technology. Now, you might not always be transacting in Bitcoin. It could be Tether, it could be other components that are taking place. There's a lot of different ideas out there, smart contracts being one of them, that people are playing around with. And eventually they're going to find the engineering solution that they need to be able to utilize in order to make these things a reality. We did it with the internet, and we can do it again with Bitcoin. And inevitably, once we do, adoption is going to continue to skyrocket because people are going to realize they can't live their lives without this thing.
I have the feeling, I don't know if you agree with me, but I have the feeling that stablecoins are going to play a very important role in the next few years. Are you expecting with the Trump administration some sort of a more friendly legislations towards stablecoins?
Yeah, and you don't have to believe me. I mean, they're saying it out loud. The last press conference that they had with David Sachs, he came out and said that stablecoin legislation was a priority, which is something that we had suspected would be a priority because there is a lot of consensus in Washington, D.C. from lawmakers there on both sides of the aisle that this is something that they can get done and that this is something that they're going to have the support for to get across the finish line. I expect there will be a stablecoin bill. There already is a stablecoin bill, but I expect a stablecoin bill will get across the finish line sometime in the middle of this year.
Literally everyone is watching Trump, and they are watching those 21 apparently states thinking about strategic reserves. Do you think it is going to be like a global FOMO into this asset, like China, Asia, Europe? They're going to FOMO into it. What do you think?
That's very possible. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't predict what other countries are going to do. All I can do is tell you what I'm seeing in real time. And what I'm seeing in real time is incredible amounts of FOMO from state lawmakers to be able to participate in this policy vertical. We not only have 20 plus, maybe it's 21, I believe at this point. It's hard to track them all because, we as so people know, we open source our model policy. A lot of these states, I would say about 99, maybe 95% of them, the bills that they're introducing to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve is based off of the model policy from Satoshi Action. We open source that, we put it on the internet. Some lawmakers, we directly engage with them or they reach out to us and we have a conversation and we're working on this bill with them directly, trying to get it across the finish line. But some lawmakers just go to the website or they see another lawmaker introduce this bill that we've made and they say, oh, I'm just going to copy that. So it's hard for us to even track all of the bills because sometimes people are just doing it completely emergently based off of the success and the FOMO that we've created around strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. We were the first in the entire world to introduce that legislation at the state level in Pennsylvania. And we've gone on to do it back to back to back to back as far as the introductions are concerned. And now we're in a great position to get it across the finish line. But what's happening is we've built this FOMO chamber where not only are we seeing states compete, we're seeing lawmakers within the same state compete. So we have some states where there's like 3 or 4 lawmakers that are like, no, I'm not going to work with you. I want to do it myself because I want to be the one to get this across the finish line. And so you've got one state, I think there's like 4 lawmakers. They're all competing to be the first one to get it done. And it's pretty much the same bill they're all introducing based off Satoshi Action model policy. So in a person, I'd love to see them work together. I think it's a better odds of the bill getting across the finish line to have 4 lawmakers working together versus competing against each other. But I just think it goes to show the level of interest and the level of FOMO, as you stated, that these lawmakers have to be on the precipice of this policy vertical. I think we're going to see more of that. Obviously, as time goes on, we're going to see more of that in Washington, D.C. as well. We're lucky to have Senator Lummis there. She's been a champion for Bitcoin. And not only has she championed Bitcoin, she has been on the precipice of pushing for strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation. And now she has also taken the chair seat for the Digital Assets Subcommittee, which is very, very important. People don't realize how important that is. It's extremely important because now what can she do? She can call for hearings. And what is she calling for a hearing on? She's already calling for a hearing on strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation in Washington, D.C. So you're creating this new world. We're creating this new way of doing Bitcoin policy. When I started Satoshi Action in June of 2022, it was rough. You had SBF, the scammer. Everybody hates him. He's trying to get a pardon now. This guy's a total loser. We have him now who in June of 2022, when he was completely collapsing, lawmakers were like, oh, isn't Bitcoin dead? Like, isn't this thing over now? Like, you guys are gone. So you can either you guys are cooked, right? Like that was basically where we are at. But now it's a totally different ballpark. We used to have to reach out to lawmakers, convince them to get a meeting with us, convince them to introduce a model policy. Now we're in a world where lawmakers are reaching out to us and asking what kind of legislation they should introduce. and how can they make their state a leader on Bitcoin. So we're entering this new time. It's extremely exciting. I'm very happy to be at the position that we're in, to be able to be leading the charge on this stuff in a lot of different states, not in all of them, but the vast majority of them we're playing a major role. And we do believe that we will get some legislation across the finish line. And we better, because there's been a lot of hype around this stuff. So we're working really hard to make sure we get it across the line and deliver true results for the Bitcoin community.
There's so much going on, and we are hovering around what, $98,000, which is complete bananas if I think about it. I mean, are you expecting like a pop at some point, or do you think it's gonna be more like smooth, gradually to the way?
I mean, we have a whole paper around this. So, I mean, if you want to go look up our thesis on how we view, the price changes in Bitcoin, it's really just a factor of supply and demand. It's very basic stuff. But we outline what the supply and the demand needs to be at a certain point to see Bitcoin jump really quickly. I don't think we're there right now. It's obvious we're not there right now. We don't see Bitcoin jumping quickly as it stands. But as we get further along the supply curve and we start to run out of supply on the exchanges, which is something that is happening, we're seeing a diminishing amount of Bitcoin on the exchanges, regular basis, it's going down. So that is a good sign. But it doesn't mean that if we jump to 125 or we jump to 150, that all of a sudden those exchange balances will increase as people try to cash in on their sort of new valuation that they've achieved with Bitcoin. But that aside, if you want to go look at this paper, it's on my Twitter feed. People can also look up Dr. Murray Rudd. He's our PhD academic who has been working with us very closely, and I think it's a really helpful tool for people to understand exactly the scenarios that you need to see in order for Bitcoin to make those types of big jumps. Definitely would encourage people to go check out that paper.
I will definitely link that in the description so they can find it easier. And I mean, what's your secret ingredient for volatility? Because, when you see the price going up and down, it could give you headaches, to say the least. I mean, how do you deal with it?
I mean, I'm sure you're probably somewhat immune to the headaches by now. I've been in Bitcoin long enough to understand that things are going to go up and they're going to go down. I think it's always good for people to have a little bit of fiat laying around as well. It's downside protection from any type of economic crunch. So that's kind of typically the way that I would encourage people. I wouldn't, it's great. Some people, they want to be all in, but at the same time, some people have mortgages, they have families to feed, they have pets to feed too as well. And so, you do got to be careful with regards to the downside potential for Bitcoin to go very low. And then you don't want to be the biggest thing is you really just don't want to be tapping into that Bitcoin at such low prices. If Bitcoin drops to 5,000, which I don't think it will, but if let's just say for round numbers and just to be hyperbolic, but if Bitcoin were to drop to 5,000 for an extended period of time, all of a sudden you're selling a lot of Bitcoin real fast to keep your life going. I think it's valuable for some people to sit on a little bit of some other type of asset in order for people to survive during those brief periods when Bitcoin does drop. And it usually is pretty brief. 6 months would be a huge amount of time to be that low. I think that would be like it would be wildly a huge record. But it could drop down that low for a month, maybe 2 months, and people should be prepared for those moments.
I usually say if you are worried about the price of Bitcoin, you are overexposed, right? Because you should know that
exactly.
it's a long-term play. So don't use money you need for rent, because that would be a degen play. Like, put a plan together, invest for 10, 15, 20 years, meaning if you are worried about the price, you are, quote, overexposed. And then it builds up with time. Like you said, I agree. You become immune to the headache. It's like, yeah, whatever. One Bitcoin equal one Bitcoin kind of thing.
That's right.
Do you do anything else? Gold, stock? Do you have any other investments?
No, I tend to just focus exclusively on Bitcoin. I don't, have any other real major significant positions outside of the Bitcoin space.
There's nothing I can tell myself to justify a better investment. I can't make my head around it. Like, this thing goes up 50% compound a year. I mean, how can you beat that? And if you move money away from it, well, you have to outperform it. Otherwise, what's the point?
That's exactly right. One, there's a lot of risks that are associated with other investments. So that's the biggest concern I have. There might be some investments that will outperform Bitcoin in the next 10 years. I'm not of the persuasion that someone won't be able to find an opportunity that jumps and outstrips Bitcoin. But the chances of picking the right one are low, and the risks are very high out in the ecosystem. I mean, even take real estate as an example. I mean, real estate has a lot of downsides compared to Bitcoin. There's a lot of risk associated with someone getting hurt around your property. You got to have taxes. You usually have property taxes, especially in the United States. You also have insurance that you have to pay for. Generally, for most people, you probably have a mortgage. Mortgage has interest. And so what people can, and it's expensive just to maintain them, right? You got to upgrade the roof, you got to repaint the house at times, you've got to do interior remodeling occasionally. So there's a lot of expenses that go into real estate, a lot of risk that's associated, and we're not even talking about like what if there's a catastrophic fire, like what happened in the Palisades? What if there is a flood? So there's a lot of risks associated with real estate that are not apparent with Bitcoin, and that's why even though real estate is considered to be one of the best investments in human history, like I would much rather hold Bitcoin.
Most people buy a property to live into it, which is a liability, not an asset. But even if you buy to let, which will be an asset in that case, well, then you have a lot of headaches. Is there anything you would like to recommend to someone who has not gone into Bitcoin yet? I mean, what would be your major tip for them?
You got to find something about Bitcoin, I think, first that draws you in. And there's a lot to love about Bitcoin. We've went through a bunch of different features and benefits of Bitcoin before, but generally speaking, how it happens is people will discover something about Bitcoin that is really in alignment with something they deeply care about in the world. I think, as an example, at the time I found Bitcoin, I cared a lot about banking the unbanked, and I still do. And I saw Bitcoin very quickly as a solution to banking the unbanked. Some people might care a lot more about payments. They might care a lot more about cross-border payments and remittances. They might care a lot more about the ability for Bitcoin mining to balance the grid and to enhance clean energy. So it's important, and I think it's good for people to just look through what Bitcoin can do, find a great resource on what its potential is. And then once you discover something that you're like, wait, I didn't know that Bitcoin could do that. I didn't understand that about this technology. Use that as your motivation to look deeper into the technology and start to study it. And you'll come across, I think, quite a few things that you will love and that you will feel are massively impactful to the world that we live in today.
I mean, it offers you so many different options, right? For me, it was property, digital property. That's the only thing I can truly own because everything else is a lie, basically. So I was really interested in investing as if, what is it I can buy that is truly mine? So then I got into this path, and
That's right.
And then, you have to build up your conviction because winter is going to come. And I don't know if you have a prediction, but we will see a correction at some point. It might be 2025, 2026, but it will correct. And this thing, when it does correct, it goes down quick. So if you don't have any conviction, you will then have paper hands, which means you will sell because you don't believe into the asset. So speaking of which, I mean, are you expecting like another 70% correction at some point, or do you think it's going to be smoother?
I mean, it's entirely possible. It really just depends on where we head from a market perspective. I think macro is really in the driver's seat finally for Bitcoin. I don't think it has been for quite a while, but it's always played a part, of course. But I think it's very much in the driver's seat now with regards to the direction that Bitcoin takes. And I think also the legislation is going to be a big component. I think there's a lot of, we saw, of course, Bitcoin take off after the administrative change at the federal level in the United States. I think also there was a big component with a lot of anti-Bitcoin lawmakers losing their races, not just at the federal level, like it's not just at the executive branch, but in Congress as well and at the state level. But now I think people are waiting for a couple of different things. There's one is like, how is the Fed and how is the government going to react to the fact that we're going to need to refinance the debt soon? How is the world dealing with the tariffs that are being levied by Trump? How, what is the future of Bitcoin going to look like if we start to print a lot more money? Are we not going to print more money? Are we going to enter an austerity phase? If we enter an austerity phase, it's very likely that Bitcoin actually goes down pretty rapidly. There can be cascading effects if Bitcoin goes down rapidly. So, I mean, I would just tell people, like you said earlier, invest what's comfortable, or sometimes just invest over the long term. Like this is a 1,000-year long project. Bitcoin won't even be done minting in brand new Bitcoins till we're all dead, 2140. Just think much longer term. Do not be in a hurry. You're not going to miss the boat. There is going to be so many waves of ups and downs in this space. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin has also been truly very de-risked. So even if there is price movements up and down, I'm not talking about price risk. I'm talking about, is this thing going to fail risk? And Bitcoin has proven that it is not going anywhere. And so even if you do invest now and Bitcoin drops 50%, you just got to wait a year or two and it'll be back over that number. So people should have a lot of confidence in investing into this asset and knowing that even if you put everything into I'm not saying people, this is not financial advice, by the way, but even if you put everything on the line and it goes down 50%, okay, so you're not drinking Starbucks. You're making coffee at home for a little while. You're not going out to eat for 6 months. You're cooking home at food for a little while. Like that's the worst thing that you're going to have to deal with, because if you wait and you hold and you don't sell, Bitcoin will absolutely recover and you will be in a much better position. And you might have gone through some pain, but you will have recovered and you will be in a great position and you will increase your purchasing power in the world. It's all about being able to hold on to the Bitcoin for the long term.
It's been great having you on the show and having you sharing your perspective. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here, Am, and thank you for the conversation. It was a good one.
Am I going to see you in Vegas for the conference?
I'll be around. Yep, sure.
I'm looking forward to shake your hands then. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Of course, as always, in the description, you will find Dennis' Twitter account and all the details in case you want to go read up on that piece that we talked about. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you on the next one.